to the latest episode of the Be Better podcast. Thank you, as always, to our regular listeners. I'm thinking there might be a few new listeners for this episode because we have, without doubt, our most prestigious guest on the show to date. Not only is the gentleman we're going to be talking to today a legend, obviously, within the B Corp world, he's also a star of Netflix. Ladies and gentlemen, that is just, unbelievable that we've managed to get Cohen Gilbert on our podcast. Jay, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you, Tim. Thanks.
Now, there will be some people possibly outside of the B Corp community who live under a rock and don't know what B Corp is and don't know who and one were and what basketball is all about. And so for those few people, Jay, who are you?
Thanks, Tim. Most importantly, I'm a husband and father of two 20-something-year-old kids here in the U.S. That are just getting into the work world. And I've been really fortunate to have had a professional career for the last 30 years. I've gotten to work with my best friends, now in three successive endeavors. The first was with the basketball company And One that you mentioned before. That was the subject of that Netflix documentary. And then with the B Corp movement, with my partners, Andrew Kasoy and Bart Houlihan, the other co-founders of the B Corp movement. And now in this sort of third leg, doing a lot of economic and racial justice work with a group called White Men for Racial Justice. And so those have been, like, over the last 30 years, the three things I've been working on. And I've been really blessed to be able to do that with really fun, smart, great people that are doing cool things that are meaningful and trying to make a difference in the world and having a lot of fun while we're doing it.
It sounds like a pretty good recipe. And that's definitely the recipe that the vibe we're trying to create at Grow Good. I remember when I first sort of connected to or realized that perhaps the path that we were going on in the business community wasn't perhaps the one that was leading us to great outcomes. Initially, I think the response is it's like almost like going through the stages of grief. Initially it's anger. It's like, why are people doing this? This is so dumb. Why can't people see that? But I guess, funnily enough, people don't like to connect to that vibe. And so I think, creating that kind of like, we're here for a good time and we're also going to make some impact is such a cool vibe. And I think it's something that the B Corp world has definitely been good at. So And One, let's, so for people who don't know about And One, talk to us a bit about And One and how did you, because I think the backstory to how you sort of started And One was pretty cool.
Well, I got to start And One with my best friend since seventh grade. He was getting out of business school at Wharton, trying to figure out how never to put on a suit and tie and whatever he could do not to go to work for Goldman Sachs. And I had been working at McKinsey & Company for a few years and then had made a transition to work in the public and nonprofit sector in New York City, and was clearly at a point where I needed to make a shift. A bunch of trips to the local jazz club over a 3 or 4 month period, exploring different business models and different ideas, eventually landed on something that was a database marketing business to try to create, before the internet, because that's how old I am.
Wow.
Trying to create a database of folks whose primary identity was they were ball players, and how to get them better deals on better product at a better price. That led us in a pretty emergent way to say, not only should we be bringing brands to those ball players, but there wasn't a brand that actually spoke directly to those ball players. And so when you looked at brands like Nike, they were in their own language designed to the exact specification of championship athletes. And they were ball players, and they were track stars, and they were football players, and they were tennis players, and they were whatever. And but they were nothing that said that you didn't wear Nike and say, I'm a basketball player, I'm a ball player. And so we recognized that basketball was the most popular sport in the US and the fastest growing sport in the world and the largest category of athletic footwear and apparel. And yet it didn't have a brand that was specifically speaking to those athletes. And so out of that sort of modest market insight came the idea to create a brand that was just for ball players. And then it became a little bit more focused on ball players who talked a lot of smack, but had the game to back it up. And so that was sort of where the energy and the attitude of the brand came from. And if Nike was designing stuff for, professional athletes and college ball players, we were coming from street ball. And every, sort of designing it for every ninth grade, point guard in New York City who thought he should be point guard for the Knicks, and that his next
Yep.
stop was going to be point guard for the New York Knicks. And so it all came out of that. And the three co-founders of that, and ultimately the six partners of that, were all pretty much basketball junkies. And we put like our love of the game at the center of the company. And that meant we knew the customer better than any of the other bigger brands that were basically putting marketing professionals and product designers into a category. We weren't coming at it from that standpoint. We were coming at it from the standpoint of what's the coolest stuff for ball players that would help identify them as a ball player, and the kind of ball player that can pick up any other four guys on the playground and run the court all day. And that was the energy for the brand. And we had a really good run for about 13 years. And it became the number 2 basketball company in the world in pretty much every market, right behind Nike, and grew to a several $100 million in revenue business, both in the US and around the world. And became quite well known for some entertainment properties that we created called the N1 mixtapes, that themselves became a pretty big deal culturally, at least here in the US, and then on the N1 mixtape tour, and on an ESPN show, and an Activision video game, and all kinds of other fun stuff that sort of combined street ball and hip hop music, and became a bit of a cultural phenomenon here in the US for about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. A bit different to McKinsey.
A little bit. Yeah. The experience at McKinsey was useful, but not too useful. Yeah.
I've got a good mate of mine is he's actually he was a partner elect. I think he possibly might be a partner in McKinsey currently. He I love you. I won't name his name just in case he doesn't want his name publicized. But he's excuse me. Yeah, he's not a basketball hip hop kind of guy. So yeah, did you find, was there an element? I mean, clearly was And1 more you than McKinsey? I'd suggest clearly, because you were there for so long, and you were a part of it.
Well, for sure, And1 was more of my personality and energy than McKinsey. And it's fair to say that the other partners at And1 were much more like eating, sleeping, drinking, breathing basketball than I was. Right. And so I was like close enough to the game and played enough that I think I had a good enough bullshit detector that I could, as head of product and marketing, know what was authentic and what was not authentic.
Yep. I
could sort of hear the tune, but I couldn't play the tune.
Yep.
Which are two different things.
Yep.
And so I was close enough that I wasn't tone deaf. But I was also distant enough that I also could bring some of those other McKinsey or business skills to bear, and understand what might be translatable into a broader marketplace, and how to grow a business and how to build a brand. Because I wasn't so attached to it personally. So I think I was at an interesting middle distance that was helpful.
Yeah, you can sort of bring that detachment to a decision. So how did young Jay end up at McKinsey and then going to And1? Like, what was the? Because I'm always interested in the path people had that led them to ultimately to B Corp, and it's mixed. Some people have always been really grounded, purpose-driven people. There might be a big influence from parents. We've always been volunteering and doing good, and kind of like doing good and impact's always been a part of it. There's a few people we've had who are very faith-based, and it's just like, this is part of my religious belief system, like doing good and doing business for good. And then there's others who are more like myself, who I was just completely out myself. And then I had a big moment that led me to realize, actually, this isn't working for you or other people. So growing up, like the path to McKinsey, it seems like a pretty well-worn path of, you do well here, you do well here, you do well here, you get there. So what was that trajectory like for young Jay?
Yeah, so I'd say a little bit meandering and not particularly direct. My path to McKinsey was more one born out of ego, and the sense of back in the 80s, when I was in college in the late 80s, when people were getting out, if you were among the best and the brightest at an elite institution of higher ed in the US, you were getting recruited by investment banks and consulting companies, management consulting companies. That was sort of where you went. And it's very early on in the tech space, but that wasn't really a thing at the time. It was a little bit early for that. And I had no interest in doing finance. And so management consulting was sort of like the the place where if you weren't truly going to sell out entirely, but just sort of sort of sell out, you would go and still think that you could look yourself in the mirror. And for me, it was like a bit of the ego of, I can prove that even though this isn't something that I think of as a career, I'm good enough that I could get that job. And then the less pure ego driven thing, but the more utilitarian thing was, I'm never going to find any better training ground in how to build an organization, how to run a business, than if I did it at McKinsey. And my mom was an entrepreneur herself, and she was a headhunter, executive search. And so she was also very clear that, Jay, you'd be an idiot not to take that offer, because you're going to have that on your resume forever. And it's going to get you into lots of rooms where people say, well, if McKinsey hired him, then he must be smart. And it will give you some credentialing and credibility to do lots of other things, whether or not you want to stay there forever. And so for me, even though at the time I knew I wanted to go into the nonprofit world around youth education, development, et cetera, that kind of thing, where I could get the skills to do that effectively, get some private sector skills to bring into the nonprofit and NGO world, that McKinsey was a good place to do that. And so a combination of sort of let me build some skills in a good place, and also let me prove to myself and to others that I'm every bit as good as those folks who are going into investment banking and on Wall Street, even if it's not what I want to do, but I could prove to myself and others that I was capable of doing that. And that was sort of the ego part.
Yeah, and because it's interesting. I give quite a few talks, and there might be some younger humans in talks these days, and some of them are, I just want to go straight to work for a company that's doing good. But there's a little part of me, because I was on the graduate training program for Johnson & Johnson, nowhere near as prestigious as McKinsey, but similar kind of concept. It's like, this is a really big company that knows a lot of stuff, and they spent thousands of dollars training me, particularly around, my job was in the sales department. So thousands of dollars spent on, training me on human psychology, how to sell, a bunch of skills that have been super, super useful. And certainly having on my CV as a young graduate, Johnson & Johnson 12-month graduate training programs, like, yep, this guy, I think there was something like 1,000 people that apply for it every year, and me and three other people got it. So it's like, okay, this guy's not a complete dummy. And so would you say for people in this day and age, is it still worth? Because the thing we hear is, the people today, the McKinsey's, these bigger consultancies are struggling to recruit because people don't want to come and work for the big machine anymore. But do you think there's still value in going and seeing possibly the dark side of some of these big machines and learning how it's done? And then, because that was kind of my breakout into Grow Good, was, if I can take all the skills that I've just learned in the commercial world, which I see is going down a bit of a path to destruction, socially and environmentally. What if I could take those skills and take them to the good sector? So do you think it's still worth people doing that, or would you say get straight into doing good?
I guess I'm not as binary about where the good is in the world, and I'm sure we'll get to Nestle and other things in the B Corp movement later on in the conversation. So I don't spend a lot of time wringing my hands over about being a purist. I think that the world is a complex place, and if we want to have transformational change, we're going to need all oars in the water, and we're going to need some built for purpose companies, and we're going to build some companies that have to be transformed along the way to finding their purpose. And so for me, if I'm talking to young folks in any of the classes that I've taught, I would say I'd much rather McKinsey pay me and train me than me pay a business school to acquire the knowledge. And so I'm much less of a fan of folks going into debt to pay somebody to educate them in a business school versus getting hands-on operational experience. But I'm not mad at whether it's J&J or P&G or McKinsey or any of the big five. Like, there's plenty of terrific companies that train people really well, and you're going to learn really useful skills. The question is, how do you use that skills and for what purpose? And you can do that at a consulting company, you can do that at a finance company, you can do that at a consumer products company. It's not so much what business you're in, it's how you choose to do the business. And all of those questions, they're not going to teach you at business school, and they're mostly not going to teach you at those places either. That's going to have to come from somewhere else. And ultimately, it's that somewhere else that I find more compelling. And at the end of the day, people have got to find their own lane on that and find their own comfort level on how they're going to determine which way they're going to go, and but there's nothing wrong with if someone's going to pay you a good salary, especially early in your career, and maybe help you pay off some of your higher ed debt that you've got from having gone to university, and give you good training that you can then deploy in other places, or use there to deploy their skills, their assets, and their resources to help transform organizations. That's all. Again, we need people everywhere bringing purpose to their work, and in order to create an economy that works for everybody, we're going to have every aspect of the economy work for that purpose. We can't just
just have sort of one part of it doing it.
Yeah. And so, as an example, Tim, the original Declaration of Interdependence for the B Corp community used to talk about building a new sector of the economy, and we changed that along with the global partners about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years into the development of the B Corp global movement. And we instead said we envision a new global economy.
Yep.
Because we went from saying, oh, we're going to build this new sector that's going to exist alongside the traditional sector, to recognizing that was an insufficient strategy. At best, it was an interim strategy, but the ultimate long-term strategy, the ultimate long-term objective was that the whole economy doesn't have to become a B Corp, but we want the whole economy to behave like B Corps and take into consideration their impact on all their different stakeholders and seek to make a positive material impact on the world, and that should be required of all companies, not just a special little sector of the economy that we can say, oh, isn't that cute? And if you want to go do purpose stuff, go over there in the corner and play with your kids' toys. We want to be playing on the main stage, and that means transforming the entire economy to be more purpose driven. And that requires us to be a little bit more gracious about how we're treating the companies that are existing already in the world and that have significant work to do. They're legacy institutions, and how do we help them change and transform? That's really important work, and I don't want to diminish or dismiss that.
100% agree. I think when I first got into this idea of the business for good, purpose-driven business, in my mind it was initially really binary. It was these people don't get to exist, these people do get to exist, and it was actually at an event here in Christchurch where the social enterprise sector was sort of burgeoning at the time, sort of 2017, 2018, and possibly a similar sort of arc of the journey. There was people in the movement saying, look, we need a separate sector. We need to build this sector of social enterprise that, the end goal is to envelop and take over normal business. And to do that, they need resource, they need capital, they need, to be like these sacred cows. And there was a person in the room from a local charity, and he just said, "Well, no, I think you're doing this wrong. Why should we be the sacred cows? So you particularly look at New Zealand. The majority of businesses in New Zealand are small businesses, mum and dad enterprises, where they're doing the best that they can. They're trying to pay the best that they can to their team. They more than likely donate some money to a local charity, or they're involved in their local school or their kids' sports teams or what have you." And he's like, "Why should that effort be diminished because you are this sort of holier than thou sacred cow?" And that for me was a real moment of revelation. It's like, no, you're right. We need to bring others into the fold. Like you say, we need to create the pie needs to get bigger, not create our own little side serving of some beautiful dip or sauce for the pie to maybe go into every now and then. And it's grey and it's complex, like you say, and ultimately who gets to decide what business has legitimacy in the modern world?
Yeah, and I agree with all that. And what I'd say, Tim, is that the thing that attracts me to the B Corp movement still is that there are real standards of performance, there's real transparency, and there's real legal accountability. And so recognizing the value of what everybody's doing is like a useful place to start. And that's like a Big Tent approach that meets people where they are. And I'm fully in support of that. And we need people to measure their performance against independent third-party standards. We need their performance to be transparent so it can get evaluated and judged by the marketplace, whether it's consumers, investors, policymakers, workforce, or whatever it might be, so people can make a more informed choice about what they buy, where they work, what they invest in, et cetera. And there needs to be real legal accountability. Climate change would be the obvious example, but you could also look at inequality and other things that are huge existential systemic threats. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that we've learned the hard way, or we're learning the hard way, that companies that only have a sort of maniacal and mono focus on maximizing profit are inherently unstable and destabilizing to the system, and don't serve anybody. And so one is, it's fine to say let 1,000 flowers bloom and meet everybody where they are, but that would be coupled to me with a regime of real third-party, credible, comprehensive performance standards, a way that they're visible and transparent to everybody so the marketplace can judge about where to allocate capital and scarce human resources. And also that it may be that once companies get to a certain size, that they're actually obligated to take on that stakeholder governance. That's sort of the key source code innovation of the B Corp movement. And they change their legal governing documents. They change their fiduciary duty for their boards of directors so that they are obligated to consider the impact of their decisions on all of their stakeholders. And that last piece, for the first 10, 12 years of the B Corp movement, we said, great, that'll be voluntary. People opt into that. They opt into being a B Corp. We passed laws in 42 US states, 6 or 7 other countries, to create the opportunity for companies to choose to be a different kind of corporation that has adopted stakeholder governance and an expanded sense of fiduciary duty. I think what we came to realize, Tim, was that the rate of adoption of that legal structure was too slow in order to meet the challenges that we're facing. And so while we don't think it's a good idea to require every company to adopt stakeholder governance, we do think the place to start is that companies over a certain size. And maybe it's $1 billion in turnover, maybe it's 1,000 employees, whatever policymakers will end up deciding. But over a certain size, you're too big to not care about anybody but your shareholders, because your impact is too big on society. And so once you can choose to be big, that's fine. We're not saying that big is bad, but we're saying once you get above a certain size, you should be legally required to expand your fiduciary duty of care, to expand your circle of care, to include not only your shareholders, but also your workers, your community, the suppliers, the environment, because your impact is just too great for us to pretend it doesn't matter and stick our heads in the sand and say, oh, we hope it'll all be fine through some kind of magic of trickle-down economics, that if you're good for your shareholders, you're good for everybody, because that really hasn't been demonstrated to be true.
Yeah, totally. I remember talking to a young, recent, probably grad-ish, couple of years into his role at a consulting firm in New Zealand. And he said, look, I'd love to have a coffee and just talk about this B Corp thing. And he said, that I've recently been given this project at work where they want me to run the numbers for a company about basically buying a machine that would get rid of like 20 employees. And I can do that all day long. But he said, I pushed back to my partner and said, well, should I also run the numbers on the impact that would have to those employees and their communities? And so, and the partner was like, no, we're not paid to care about the communities. We're paid to care about our customer maximizing their income. And that's the thing, I think it always amazes me when those those programs, when the CEO goes undercover and they go and meet their staff and they actually see how they're struggling and how decisions that are being made in this sort of maybe ivory tower boardroom actually do have an impact on real humans. And I don't know, it just feels like in general, business in some ways, but it's almost like we've been captured for the last 100 years or so, post-industrial revolution, in this concept that just getting as much money as possible is the thing. Yet there's so much evidence from psychological literature that actually just chasing the money isn't good for you on an individual level, and it will create all these ripple knock-on effects. And yeah, it's fascinating that we've been led down that rabbit hole. But I guess this is where you and the team have shone the light on it to go, look, you can do good and do good for yourself.
And just to be clear, there are some times when you're going to make decisions to invest in that technology, and that's going to have some short-term effects that aren't going to be great for those 20 people.
Yeah.
Or shift your factory production from here to there, or exit this business or enter that business. And so we're not trying to say that that you don't have to run a profitable business. If you don't have a profitable business, you don't have a business. You have a charity.
100%.
And what we're saying is that you need to consider the impact of your decisions on all those stakeholders. And when you assess all of that over time, that you've done a good job balancing those stakeholders, as opposed to only trying to maximize the impact for one stakeholder.
Exactly.
And that just requires a little bit more caring, expansive mindset, without being prescriptive that you have to do this or you have to do that. It's just saying we're going to judge you by the sum total of your actions over a period of time. And that gets back to the importance, Tim, of making sure the legal structure aligns with that, and make sure that the performance standards, the measurement and the management systems align with that, because otherwise you're just trading anecdotes. You're going to say, oh, you don't care about those 20 people. And the CEO is going to say, well, if I didn't do that, I'm going to get killed in the marketplace. I can't compete with price. Then we have to shut down the whole place for 200 people. And so neither of them are wrong. And neither of them should be viewed in isolation. The question is, how do we assess the impact of the business as a whole, not any individual decision? And that's why one of the most important parts of the B Corp model is that it's a company assessment, not about an individual practice, right, or individual policy, but we're looking at the company as a whole. And companies have to recertify every 3 years because practices change and the marketplace has changed, and so we want to make sure that they're continuing to meet that bar over time, because ultimately that's what we're creating that trust mark for. At the end of the day, the B Corp logo is a trust mark, right? For consumers, for workers, for investors. Say, oh, I know this company is thinking about these things, and I know they're using their best judgment to try to balance the positive impact across all their different stakeholders. And I'm going to believe in them that they're going to do that. And I get to see empirical evidence to the extent that I think they've done that well over time.
Again, I totally agree. It's the nuance. It's gray. Doing good is gray. It's not black or white, because like you say, you got to think of the long-term profitability of the company. I think the key, I guess, being born out of the US, where when you're the CEO of a company in the US, your only sort of fiduciary duty is to make more profit or more revenue next quarter than you did the previous quarter. Whereas that pressure is typically outside of listed companies. That pressure is less, I think, in other jurisdictions in the world. But that mantra, that mindset, that has been the only decision that's been driving the large part of the global economy. Is you need to have a bigger return next quarter than this quarter, and I don't care. It's like I don't care how you do that. And I think I think for me that was one of the big moments of realization for me at the heart of the B Corp movement. Is that's actually the key thing. Is it's changing the mindset, the decision making of yes we could do that, but at what cost? Okay, we get rid of our call center staff and we outsource it, and then we have worse customer service. We've just decimated a community of some people locally. Our corporate reputation in the local community is going to go down. Is the call center going to be up to speed because we've outsourced it and it's overseas, and that can sometimes lead to challenges. So the net effect actually is going to be maybe in the next quarter we're even further behind. And so, it's just thinking. We worked with a company here called Trinio, who then were bought by a Canadian B Corp that was then bought by Salesforce. So they no longer exist. But one of the co-founders, Abhinav, he was talking about he's of Indian descent, and he said I think it was one of his cousins working for a company in India. He said the shortest time frame business plan they have is 100 years. And so we've been so focused on next quarter, and if you're in the startup world, it might even be tomorrow, next week. Sure. When's the roadmap out? Like, we need 10 more clients? And so, I think for me that was the heart of it. It was like let's just think bigger. Let's just think about actually what's the long-term interest. Let's just at least start to consider that rather than just take the cash. Open the box, take the cash every time. Right. So you mentioned earlier on that the sort of McKinsey journey. You sort of alluded to the fact that you were maybe prior to that, or at the same time, you were looking at, or you were interested in the not-for-profit sector and sort of youth development.
Right.
So where did that idea come from?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I grew up in a pretty affluent household in New York City and was always around, recognized that I had a lot of advantages that other folks didn't. And so, whether it's from there or from different travels, we were lucky enough to be able to travel around a bit as a young family. And I could see that, like, not everybody could live the same way that our family lived, and that felt a little bit unfair. And
Mm.
and I knew that the schools that I was going to had different resources than the schools that in other parts of the city, and that felt unfair. And so there's probably some of that was just sort of baked into my DNA from where I grew up and how I
Yep.
grew up. And uh, and so that was that was sort of there for me coming out of school, coming out of university, and but I got a job offer at McKinsey, and my
Yep.
mom said, "You better take it." And I said, "Yeah, it's probably a good idea to take it." So I did.
Yep.
And the rationalization was I'm going to learn some skills that I could eventually apply in the nonprofit world, which I did for a few years, and then realized that that was for different reasons, like not the path for me.
Yep.
Um, and started and one with, like I said, with my best friend,
Mm.
and moved from New York to Philly, and that business took off like a rocket ship from pretty much the very beginning. And so, like, before we knew what we had, it was $1 million business, then a multi-million-dollar business, then 10, then 50, then 100, then a couple $100 million business in its first 6-7 years. So it was a rocket ship.
Mm.
And that was a lot of fun. And we had a service mission inside of And One, because we wanted the company to be a place we'd be proud to work, that our parents would be proud that we were running, and that our kids, ultimately by that time we were young parents, that our kids would be proud that their parents were running.
Yep.
And eventually even that sort of ran its course, and we realized there was only so much good that could be done through the model that And One had started with. And I started to get more, feeling a little bit more constrained, and started looking around to other businesses that were even more inspirational to me, like the Patagonias, the Body Shops, Tom's of Maine, Ben and Jerry's, and while early, what then were called socially responsible businesses. And I thought they were doing amazing things, far and away more impactful than what we were doing at And One. And we tried to bring as many of those practices into And One as we could, but there was a limit, because it hadn't been the company hadn't been started with that intention. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more focused in that area. And eventually, over a period of years of discernment and learning and listening, that led to the idea of a B Corp. And then we sold And One, took a year of sabbatical, which was a lot of fun, including some time down in your neck of the woods in a camper van, running,
Nice.
for 5 weeks through the South Island, and had a blast with the kids at the time, who were 5 and 6. And then came back to start B Lab and the B Corp movement.
Because it just sounds like, because for me the B Corp it's this blend of purpose and profit. It's, like we said, be a profitable business, but it's how you're making the profit, but also with the profit that you're making, what are you doing with it? And I guess, yeah, to a degree, the operational, how you're treating, obviously, for the people who haven't looked at B Corp, it looks at the governance, so your transparency of ownership, and what you're reporting, how you treat your staff, your community impact, including your supply chain, your environmental footprint, and then how you treat your customers. And so, again, that's for me why I kind of felt so much attachment with the B Corp movement. It's like, because I think it's, you've got experience in the not-for-profit sector. I've had a couple of goes in the not-for-profit sector. The business world typically looks at the not-for-profit sector and it's like, oh, look at you, pat on the head, you're trying really well, but you don't really understand business. So you just carry on, doing some stuff. And then charity looks at business going, yeah, but it's you lot causing all this trouble. If you could just give us more money, we'd be better equipped. And so I kind of feel, again, like the B Corp is sort of melding the two together. And it's almost this hybrid where, partly in my mind, I almost imagine the long-term future where maybe there's a bunch of charities that we don't almost need to have anymore, because the challenges that they were picking up the slack on are no longer there, because the business community has taken that on and solved the problem, so that it's not like an endemic challenge that needs to be, have a band-aid put on. And so I think
Yeah.
it was just interesting reflecting on your journey, that you had this idea of not-for-profit, you went and did the McKinsey, and you ended up with B Corp, which is the
In the
putting of the
middle.
two
Yeah.
together.
It was meant, you're 100% right, Tim. It was meant to be a middle path. And we think that there's real power in private enterprise and the for-profit model for lots of reasons. It can aggregate and allocate capital effectively. It can attract talent in a way that the nonprofit sector can't. But by slavishly serving the single master of maximizing profit for shareholders, it loses its soul and it causes lots of harm. And that doesn't mean the people that are doing it are bad, evil people. It just means they're in a pretty amoral system at best that has pretty immoral output or outcomes. And similarly, the nonprofit sector has a ton to offer. It's super purpose driven. It attracts folks that are going to make that their priority. But it's also like not particularly scalable. It's hard to attract and retain talent. And it's hard to attract capital and solve problems at scale. And so we wanted to marry the purpose-driven aspect of the nonprofit sector with the profit-driven discipline and scalability of the for-profit sector, and say that's at the time, that's why we said it was a new sector of the economy that was marrying those two things. And I don't think it will ever negate the need for civil society, NGOs, and nonprofits. There are going to be plenty of places the market doesn't go, and plenty of problems the market does not fix and will not fix. And so we're going to need incredible nonprofit entrepreneurs and managers out there. But yeah, maybe they can be doing less remedial work than they're doing now. They don't have to clean up so many messes. But they can be, blazing new trails and taking us places that can then make a market. Well, then once that's happened, proof of concept, et cetera, then maybe there are other things that can flow in to that space. But this doesn't replace the need for civil society or the public sector. It just says we need to be a better partner to those sectors of the economy.
Sort of lessen the load on them so that they can stop being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, maybe. And I guess also part of the B Corp framework, gets a lot of companies to maybe consider, well, could we have some partnerships with charitable organizations, which maybe historically we've just given some cash, but maybe, could we, through the lens of the assessment, maybe we could look at deepening some commitments. And it's super cool. So so my understanding, and I'd love to be corrected if I am wrong, but my understanding is that the whole ethos really was to beat Nike. That was kind of like underpinning the most of the decision making in the company, and that was working up until you had a bit of an existential moment of realization that maybe this wasn't the right path. Is that I've read that in a media report.
No, I don't think our objective was to be the number one basketball company in the world, and in order to do that, we'd have to beat Adidas, Reebok, Converse, Nike, all of them. But we didn't spend all of our time trying to figure out. You had to take your aim at Nike because they were in the number one dominant position. But we spent 99% of our time focused on the customer. Focused on the ball player, not on Nike and our competition. And what happened, a number of things happened. But one of the main things that happened is we were a little bit late to the party on the internet, and we had started a separate company called hoopstv.com, where we had raised a bunch of money from venture capitalists to take the And One mixtape property and turn it into the core content for an internet-based basketball site. And we were both too early for the broadband revolution, before video was actually functional on the internet, and we were too late for the frothy evaluations of the early first wave of internet companies. We got caught in between, and also didn't execute very well. But more importantly than that, we split our team, and so we used to have the best team in the industry with more talent and lots of bench strength. If you use a sports metaphor, we had a very deep bench of talent. When we started Hoops TV, we basically split the team and had half the team going to run that business, which meant that we halved or more the amount of talent, focus, energy that we had on And1. And you can't take on a dominant player in an industry only focusing part of your attention and part of your resources on that. And so we had some self-inflicted wounds that wasn't so much about self-inflicted wounds where we diluted our focus from just focused on developing the best product at the best price for ball players into doing lots of other things. And I think it was more that dilution of focus that was the core problem at M1.
And in terms of some of the, because my understanding is some of the CSR stuff that you implemented early in the day, you had a bit of an extra. The media report I read was that you had a near miss where your sister was involved in 9/11, and then a couple of weeks after, one of your colleagues or one of the team members at And1 passed away, and you sort of mentioned that was. Because for me, it was the earthquakes here in Christchurch, and then 2012, the birth of our daughter. That's what led me to go. All the stuff that I've been seeing in because I used to sell medical devices, hips and knees, and spinal instruments and implants, and those big existential shocks led me to see the stuff that I knew that was happening but wasn't really seeing. I could now see it in sharp relief, and that was the understanding that you had this kind of couple of week period where you kind of like actually realized maybe there's more to life than just selling as many shoes as we can.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think what you're referring to is September of 2021. Sorry, of 2001.
Yeah.
9/11 happened. Our father died. My sister was pulled out by first responders a block from the Trade Center, and a dear colleague named Jean-Bernard Jute was killed in an automobile accident, all within 3 weeks of each other in September of 2001. And for sure, that rocked me and forced me to take some time and think about what was most important. But what I'd say, Tim, is we already had we were already running what would have been considered to be a responsible business at the time. And we were already doing the typical things, donating 5% of profits to charity and all those kinds of things. What that helped me realize was that there was a lot more that I could be doing and that And1 could be doing. And how can we maximize the service opportunity within the business model that we had? And so that time period led us to create then the And1 service mission that I mentioned before, that called us to use every aspect of the business as a service opportunity. And that led to a lot deeper exploration of all those things, whether it's around supply chain or worker ownership or environmental practices or whatever it might be. And that eventually, between 2001 and 2005, when we sold the company, over those 4 years, there was a gradual deepening of those practices at And1, but also a realization that there was only so far that could go inside that company and inside that the financial constraints of that industry at the time, which was consolidating and putting tremendous pressures on margin. And so as we got closer to the sale time of the company, I had also independently decided that I was going to be leaving to do something different that was going to be more fully purpose-driven. It happened to coincide with the sale of the company.
Right.
And so the early ideas for the B Corp movement started in 2001, 2003, 2004. And then by the time we sold the company in 2005, there was already a gestating energy with some of the companies that eventually became the founding B corporations. And it took till, again, I mentioned earlier that after we sold the company, I took a year off on a family sabbatical. The B Corp thing had already been started. It already had early movement on that. That got put on a hold or a pause, and then came back in the spring of 2006. And with Bart Houlihan and Andrew, we then founded B Lab. And within a year after that, had developed the standards that became the basis of the B Corp assessment. And by the summer of 2007, had certified the first 18 companies at what was called the BALI conference, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies conference out in California. And we introduced those 18 companies as leaders in the field, and they're the ones who told the rest of the conference why they became B Corps.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned earlier, I think in our pre-call, that you'd been a big evangelist for B Corp since almost day one in New Zealand, and yourself, your own company was the 6th B Corp in New Zealand, and that as you were evangelizing and being an ambassador in New Zealand, that folks weren't really particularly ready for the message.
Yeah.
And so what we realized is that people didn't need to hear from Jay, Bart, and Andrew about B Corps and systems change and all that. What they need to hear from was from other CEOs, talk about why this was meaningful to them. And so in our very first public appearance, we were given the mic to share about B Corps at this business conference. And we said, great. And we spoke for 2 minutes. And there were 18 chairs lined up behind us with 18 incredible entrepreneurs behind us. And we got off the stage and let them come up one by one and share with their peers why, even though they were already known as a leader in their industry or in their region, why they decided that they wanted to become a certified B Corporation. And then for the next 5, 6, 8 years of the early parts of the B Corp movement, it was always peer-to-peer, word of mouth marketing, where a CEO would say, hey, look, this has been one of the best things that we've ever done. It's helped us attract and retain the best talent. It's helped us build a really powerful corporate culture around purpose. The standards are a really great educational tool to help us see things that we weren't seeing before, to find other opportunities to have a positive impact. And yes, eventually all of those things are going to mean something to a consumer, but we know that that's a little ways away because no one knows what the heck a B Corp is, but we're willing to invest in this now so that it's useful in the future. And all that stuff happened because it was CEOs who were early adopters and their teams that were early adopters that said, this is meaningful to us. This helps us create the change we seek in the world, because we know no matter how big and incredible our individual company is, the economy is a heck of a lot bigger. Our industry is a heck of a lot bigger than us. And so how can we have an outsized impact? How can we punch above our weight as change makers? And we can do that a lot better as a community of companies that share a unifying set of credible standards and can project our voice with power into the marketplace. Ultimately, that was the bet. The bet was that we can do something together that we can't do alone. And that was the power of the B Corp movement. Wasn't about Jay, Bart, or Andrew, it was about the community of companies that could help shift culture about what's possible in business. And that's the thing that still inspires me the most about the B Corp movement. And ultimately, what I think the future of the B Corp movement is, it's about this kind of collective action. And whether that's about being net zero by 2030, or it's about reducing inequality in the workplace, or it's about achieving racial equity in the workplace, or whatever it might be, it's about how can we take collective action as a community of companies to drive change. And sometimes we'll be successful, like changing the laws to create the stakeholder governance structures. And sometimes we won't be right away, like what happened with your brothers and sisters in Australia, where they came out in support of the constitutional amendment to create voice for Aboriginal peoples in Australia. And that got defeated. But my bet is that will eventually pass in Australia, and that having the voice of a business community that's saying, we're not afraid of that. We don't think that's going to be a slippery slope to making bad decisions or feeling bad about ourselves. We think that's going to be a beautiful next step to being looking at ourselves honestly and our history honestly, and making sure we create a society that works for everybody. And we're totally in favor of that, And so I think having business voice show up to impact public policy around social and environmental issues is going to become an increasing part of the B Corp movement over time.
Yeah, that's just really cool to hear the backstory from the horse's mouth, so to speak, because you pick up sort of, as an expression we'd say in the UK, you pick up fag ends, little cigarette butts and you try and create the full thing. So that's interesting that you'd been kind of scheming on it for a few years, because the understanding that I'd had, it was more of a kind of like, actually, do you know what, I want to change, almost on a dime. So that was interesting that you're sort of having those pre-conversations, because Bart was part of the team at And1, is that correct? And then Andrew came from outside.
Andrew was an investor. We all went to college together,
right?
And Bart was one of the original partners at And1. Andrew was one of the original investors, because he was one of our friends who worked on Wall Street, so we had a little bit of extra money, so we could invest a little bit of money in our little crazy venture. And so we were all best friends since college. And but when Bart and I sold And1, he had already been engaged in some of the early thinking about B Corp as it was sort of gestating during that period. And then while I was in Australia and New Zealand and in Costa Rica during that year off, he and another friend were sort of doing some stress testing on the early B Corp model and the early B Lab model. And by the time I came back, they had done enough sort of critical assessment. I'm a bit more risk-taking entrepreneurial energy, and they're a little bit more sort of prudent, solid business discipline. And so they had done their tire kicking and interviews with folks to see if this had legs. And by the time I came back, they said, yeah, we think it does have legs, and we'd be interested in doing it together. And so when I came back, we were ready to go. And we bought our desks from IKEA, put them together in my spare bedroom above the garage.
Nice.
Called the phone company to set up the lines and started calling people and developing the standards. And a year later, had that conference in California where we had those 18 companies. It basically helped us create the standards. Like, they were the ones who helped inform us about what are the different ways we should measure positive impact. And we were sort of done all in consultation with the leaders in the field. Which is why they said, hey, if you're going to be speaking about this in public, we want to be there on stage with you. Because if the curtain's going to open on the B Corp movement, we want to be there for the first act. Nice. And it was really their credibility that made everything work. And it's been the same case everywhere in the world. Wherever there's in a new country that's opened up, it's always those first entrepreneurs like yourself that took the risk to say, hey, I know it means nothing here. I know nobody knows what I'm talking about. They look like I got 3 heads and horns and a tail, but I think this is important, and I'm gonna show people by doing it. And then it's going to be with 2 friends and 2 friends. Now there's 10 of us, then there's 50 of us, then there's 100 of us, and all of a sudden it starts to create some momentum, and all of a sudden it starts to be a better party. And people always want to join the better party that's got better music, better food, and cooler people. And so if you can attract those type of folks to be the starting group, people are then going to want to join something that feels fun and successful. And that's what the B Corp movement has been. And it's still, the truth is, it's still in the early stages. There's now over 8,000 B Corps. So I think we're right around 8,000 B Corps in the world. And that's still, of course, tiny. And it's wonderful that there's dozens of publicly listed companies that are billions in turnover. And there's all kinds of billions of dollars of venture capital has gone to the B Corp community. And that's really gratifying. But we also know that we're still at the very, very early formative stages of this. Where we all need to be in this together, and which is why I always come back to the collective action and the collective voice. Is we don't need everybody to be a B Corp. We want everybody to behave like a B Corp, and that's going to become because they're going to hear your podcast. They're going to meet the companies that you interview, and they're going to say, "Oh, I bet we could do some of that." That sounds pretty cool, and that sounds like it's certainly not going to hurt my business, and it might even help. But it'll probably be the kind of company that my kids will be proud of, that their dad or their mom is in. And that feels pretty good too. Ultimately, that's a pretty good reason to do this, is we all want our kids to be proud of what we're doing. And we want to make our parents proud for whatever advantages and whatever gifts they've given us. We're just sitting in the middle of that baton relay from our parents to our kids. And we're just trying to run our leg of the race, with some integrity, and give it all we got. And this, to me, is the highest and best use of what you can do in the business world, is try to use your business for a higher purpose than just making more money for yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think Tony Robbins has got the quote, no one ever regretted doing good.
That's a good one.
It's like, it's true. You'll regret plenty of things you bought, or doing the sneaky thing that you probably would have been caught on, but I did some good. You're never going to regret that. So I love that idea of the baton. It's so true. It's like, you are the guardian of the baton for a small period of time, and it'll go in a blink of an eye. So, and for me, definitely when my daughter was born, that was a big moment of realization. It's like, I've got a responsibility here. I'm now, I'm going to be handing something over to her, my little part of the planet. So why wouldn't I leave that in a better place, holistically, rather than just making sure that, maybe she can start her life debt free, which she probably will do, because she's going to be a lucky little tinker. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like, beyond that, yeah, what else would you want to leave for your kids? So again, I think it's questions that typically aren't asked. Well, maybe they are increasingly these days, but historically, I guess when you were at school, that's probably not a question that you're pondering on
No.
the past in McKinsey. It's like, it's
No,
or any of the
I
other big
went through the
consulting.
McKinsey. I went through the McKinsey training program, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I could use an HP 12C calculator, and I can calculate net present value, and I could do lots of good best practice studies and other cool things. I could learn how to do great charts with no more than three bullets on a chart, and I could learn all kinds of great communication techniques. But never once did anybody talk about why.
Yeah,
Not once did anybody talk about purpose.
yeah. And I think that's changing. I generally get a sense that they're changing.
Yeah. And I'm not hating on them. I'm just saying it like things are evolving, right? Our intentions are evolving.
Oh,
and so
100%.
our institutions have to evolve with them.
Yeah.
And B Corp represents that. It's an evolution of putting our best intentions into business as opposed to compartmentalizing. So, well, I park everything that I love and care about outside, and then I go into work.
Maximize everything in this one lens. Yeah, and then I go back out.
That seems like pretty unhealthy and also just not a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it's not nice to compartmentalize your life. It's much more fun if you're doing it all holistically. And
100%.
Anyway, so that's I think, and then the lens of how do you want to explain what you do to your grandkids is a pretty useful lens.
Yep.
And so when your grandkids say, so, Papa, like climate change, all this other stuff was going on. What were you doing?
What were you doing? Yeah.
Oh, well, 100%. Hon, I would have done more, but like the constraints of shareholder primacy and market forces, there's only so much I could do. Like that's not going to be a great conversation, And so how do we show up with humanity and as human beings first, that are then using business as a tool, as opposed to feeling constrained by the structures and systems in the business, because we created those systems and structures. We can recreate them.
100%. There's Adam Curtis, who's a British documentary maker. He's got a quote which I'll butcher really badly, but essentially it's like, the world is a creation of our imagination. We can imagine a different world. It's like, it's so true. He's got a really cool documentary called Hypernormalization, where he just talks about there are some things in the world that are so normalized that you cannot imagine a world that doesn't have that idea or that structure. But this is what he's saying, is like that all the structures around us have been created by us. And you just need to challenge those structures and challenge the ideas behind them. Keep the ones that are good and serve us, but reconsider the ones that are no longer a service to us. I've also often thought that a guerrilla marketing tactic of sort of trying to get more corporate people to sort of have a bit of a think about their part of the baton, it would be to send a copy of the Lorax to every small child in the world and get them to go and read the story to the most senior person in their household in business, and just have that moment to try and crystallize the fact that there's other things that your grandchildren need than a big house and a flash holiday.
Totally. And Tim, I'm looking over on the other side of my screen here, and there's a signed print from one of the art cards from the Lorax, which is on the Lorax. They speak for the trees. And so like right over my shoulder here. Well, there you go. So I couldn't agree more. And so who's going to speak for the trees, right? Who's going to speak for the folks who don't have a voice? And as business leaders, we have some of the most power in our culture. And so with that power comes an awful lot of responsibility, and even more importantly, just a lot of opportunity. We have more opportunity to do good than almost anybody else. And what a shame to squander that opportunity because of a failure of imagination or a failure of courage,
Yeah, there's I was doing a purpose workshop last night for an organization. One of the questions I like to ask about trying to just get people thinking about why purpose is important is, give me the name of the richest person in the world in 1968, 1969. And typically no one knows the answer. And from the research I did, it was Robert Wood Johnson, one of the founding brothers of Johnson & Johnson. There's a few other people that, there or thereabouts. And then I'll say, okay, well, who is the richest person in the world ever when you account for inflation and currency change and da-da-da-da-da. And over the probably 6 years I've been doing this workshop, 2 people have ever got the answer. And that is Mansa Musa, who was emperor of Mali between 1280 and 1320. He literally was sat on a gold mine in Mali. And, so then I'll go, okay, well, let's go back to 1968, 1969. There was a guy in North America who wrote and delivered a speech about having a dream for a group of Americans to have a better future. Who was that person? And even the sort of 17, 18-year-olds in the room will go, MLK. And this is the thing, is like, people don't remember what you had. No, I asked this to sort of CEOs if we're talking to them, and they're a bit reluctant about the B Corp. Okay, can you give me the name of the company that was listed number 4 on the New Zealand Stock Exchange in May 2013? And they just go, well, I've got no idea. Right. So why do you care so much about maybe being number 1 next month? Because in 2 years' time, no one's going to remember. Yet the feeling that you can engender by doing a piece of good that might resonate through thousands of people across communities, that will be a story that will be anchored and told possibly intergenerationally. Well, is that worth pondering on? And yeah, it's just I think we're getting there. I think more and more people are having these moments. And I guess it's as some of the younger CEOs step in who have been brought up with this kind of thinking. Yeah, we're getting there. But those early days must have been pretty exciting. Those initial companies were companies that you kind of knew. Obviously when the Patagonias started coming on, were you just like knocking on Yvonne's door saying, hey, or were they coming to you at a certain point?
There was a fair amount of door knocking and a fair amount of just going to be on the conference circuit and talking about it, and ultimately getting the other CEOs to talk with their peers and invite their peers in. We had been talking with Patagonia for 5 years. Patagonia was B Corp number 500.
Wow.
And so there were 499 B Corps before Patagonia ever became a B Corp. We've been talking to them for 6 or 7 years before they agreed to do it. They're and that's a beautiful thing. Like they were super deliberate, and they wanted to make sure it was the right thing and not just a sort of fly by night flash in the pan, and that it was really rigorous and would be of value to them as a company that had helped set the standard for 20, 30 years prior to that. And so it was a huge honor for us that Patagonia ultimately said, this is something that we think is going to add value to our company. They then became the first company in California to incorporate using the new law that we had passed to create stakeholder governance. And so while they were the 500th certified B Corporation, they were the first company in California to actually use the newly created legal structure to embed that in their governing documents, which they carried forward even when they did that perpetual purpose trust last year, when they basically sold the company to Mother Earth and made Mother Earth their shareholder. They still retained their B Corp status and their stakeholder governance, because they realized that what you do with your profits is only one aspect of the positive impact you can have on the world. Like how they make their products, who they make them for, has huge impact, arguably larger than any philanthropy that they're ever going to do. And so it was the combination of those two things that made sense. And this gets a little bit back to the big tent and play the long game approach. Is because we assume that we're trying to envision a new global economy. That means we need everybody on board, which means we have to be patient, and it doesn't mean we don't have to be firm and clear that standards matter and performance matters, and make a good case for why there's an urgency to this. But we have to have like an urgent patience and allow it to take its time for that individual entrepreneur, because not everybody can be going at the same speed, and hopefully the conversations that you were having 4 and 5 and 6 years ago, that the resistance is a little bit less than it is now. Hopefully some of the reasons why people are giving that they're not quite ready for it are different than what they're giving now. And now what I hear mostly is it's about timing. I've got this going on this quarter or this 12 months, or I've got this capital raise to do or whatever. I've got this internal challenges because of COVID, et cetera. So I've got to really focus on that. But it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And that's a very different conversation than we used to have, 10 years ago. And so, slowly, all of a sudden it becomes inevitable that this is the way people are doing business. And the question is, when do they choose to move down this path? And do they want to be part of a B Corp community, like, and literally get certified or do that? Like, maybe that makes sense for folks and maybe it doesn't. But at the end of the day, if you're only concerned about your own company's performance, you could say, look, I'll use the B Impact Assessment as a free tool to understand where to create the biggest impact. I'll even use your legal standards to help make sure that my mission is baked into my legal DNA and it can withstand the tensions that will show up when we have outside investors or if we were publicly listed, et cetera. But I don't really need to join your little club.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, that mindset is sort of like the last holdout mindset, which is usually someone who's got a fair amount of ego, who at the end of the day is still saying this is still about me and my company. And that's really my only frame. And the people that are most inspiring to me have always been the people that speak in the language of we instead of the language of me, and realize that we're trying to shift the whole system. And that requires collective action and collective voice. And that systems change is going to require much more than individual businesses, whether it's 8,000 or 80,000 businesses. It's going to require policy changes that create the incentives and the guardrails that enable us to build an economy that works for everybody and for the long term. And that's going to require a collective voice of business leaders saying that that's a direction we want to go and that we support it. Because traditional business doesn't want to have government engaged in any part of the private sector. They just want them out of the way. And that's, again, a myopic view of where value is created and for whom. But if we're trying to create value for all, and we're trying to make sure that the systems themselves are healthy for everybody, including, your daughter and her eventual kids, then we're going to need to have a supportive public policy environment that's going to recognize that we need business to operate within the limits of natural systems and in support of healthy, vibrant democracies that are inclusive, et cetera. And so, like, all that requires business voice, and that requires more than just Tim or Jay speaking from the voice of their companies. It requires us to speak with a collective voice as companies that use business as a force for good. And now we have a name for those companies. They're called B Corps. And you don't just have to believe what those CEOs say. You can look, and they're actually evaluated by rigorous third-party standards, and they're transparent with their performance, and they are legally accountable to balance profit and purpose, and that makes their voice credible. And that's the next frontier of this work, is really in that collective action for policy change that'll drive economic systems change.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I always reflect. Yeah, I think we're like I say, close to 8,000 in New Zealand. We're about 120 B Corps, and from the calculations that I've done on just limited companies, so LLCs or limited companies around the world, it's about 0.01% of the global business community is currently a B Corp. So, right. When people kind of go, oh, it's like you are literally joining the top, like you're the top gun of the top gun of the top gun of businesses in terms of ones who are demonstrating. And you're right, the resistance is, even 3 years ago, we were still, having conversations with people, and it was educating them on what B Corp was and maybe why they should do it. Now the conversation we're having is, when should we do B Corp and how do we do it?
Right.
And that has been in the 3 years. And the only other thing I'd add, certainly bigger legacy companies, and even in the medium-sized sort of companies, quite often one of the fears that they have is we're not good enough to be a B Corp, because they almost see it as such a high standard that how can we be a B Corp? Because Patagonia is a B Corp, or locally we've got companies like Etique, one of like a really successful B Corp. Like, I'm not as good as them, and it's like, well, it's a framework, and it's not a competition as to whether you're better or whatever. It's like, just use the framework and then use that as a guide to work out where you can be better. So don't be afraid. And quite a few of our clients have actually been shocked. They go, oh my gosh, like we are actually a big corp. Like, oh, like we've done it. It's like, yeah, because you're good humans doing some good stuff. Like, you're not perfect, but no one's perfect. There is no 200-point B Corp. Like, no one has won B Corp. Ring the bell. That's right. We've won it. It's like, this is a journey of exploration and connection. And just, we always say to people, look, don't, year one, just get certified. Don't even stress about implementing a whole bunch of new stuff, because there's gonna be enough work for you to get it done initially. But just make sure that you aim to be, do as much good with what you can with what you've got available right now. But just use that as a lens to the future to know where you can think about doing more good. But don't stress that you're not doing it all today.
Right. You could think of it. It's a road of a continuous improvement in a community of practice. in which people are having a really good time doing cool things that they're proud of. Like it's a pretty easy thing to say yes to when you frame it like that.
Yeah, it's unfortunately Dr. Pepper's is not as well known in New Zealand. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? It's it's like you might like it, and your business
Right.
might do better, and you might get some more customers, and you might have employees knocking on your doors, and investors might be more willing to give you a better rate. Oh no.
Right. Right.
So did you back in the day? Did you? I guess you wanted it from day one to be a global movement. Do you feel like it's kind of meeting your expectations? Is it on track in terms of the growth, or did you have any intentions around that, or you just sort of like pleasantly surprised that more than the first 10 people sort of okay, actually these guys they've got something here?
No, like I said about jokingly about like taking the route to McKinsey, or like is I have a pretty healthy ego. And so if the goal of And One was to become the number one basketball company in the world, like that wasn't short of ambition, for what we wanted to do. And when we started B Lab and the B Corp movement, it was to transform the global economy. So that's also not like short of ambition and hubris. And so and I say that with a smile only because like there's a famous quote from Henry David Thoreau that he said it's something along the lines of we better aim high, because at the end of the day we only hit the targets we aim at. And so why would you shoot for anything other than the beautiful radical transformation of the economy so that it works for everybody and for the long term, and so you have an economy in which everyone can thrive? Like that's such a lovely future to be working towards. And so we always envisioned it as a global community. And whether there's 8,000 or 18,000, I don't think we ever had any particular, projected 10-year plan, let alone your friend's 100-year business plan. Like we haven't really specialized in that. But we said that like we know this is the direction, we know this is the destination, and we know that's the direction of travel. And we know we can only get there if we go there with others, and so let's start walking down that path and make it as fun and as meaningful and rewarding as possible, so more people want to join, and we'll get there as fast as we get there, and so there's things that we've done way faster than we thought, and then there's things that have taken way longer than we thought, because you never know. And a good entrepreneur is able to sort of like play with the hand that they're given and react to different market forces and see what's happening. And so we're trying to be thoughtful, entrepreneurial. And as we mentioned maybe before, is I haven't been in an operating role in the B Corp movement in now almost 4 years. And the amazing things that are happening since I've stepped back are phenomenal, because there's new leadership in every region of the world, in every country, and at B Lab Global, that are doing incredible things I never would have thought to do. And they're doing them really well, and there's constant evolution and creative tension in any worthwhile venture. And there are things I would do differently. And that's like, who cares? Like they're going to do the best they can with the information they've got. And they're going to make some great decisions that I would have thought were terrible, but that'll end up being like genius. And that's the beauty of it, is I get to step back and they get to step in and lead it for the next phase of growth.
Yeah, it's like you've created a beast for sure. It's like it's growing tendrils and tentacles, and I think it's true for any sort of it's a startup organization where you were one of the co-founders. There always comes a tension point where you can't really be in charge anymore, because you are the constraint. And it's interesting. Yeah. Have you done any personal development work on taming the hubris and the ego, or do you think has that happened over time?
Both.
Yeah.
I think as we get older, we probably hopefully our ego gets a little bit more in check, because like the world happens to us. But yeah, I've done a fair amount of personal work, and the biggest challenge for me is letting go, and particularly letting go of control. And as someone who's grown up and always seen himself as like his identity is attached to being smart and having answers and etc., like that can be really useful at certain parts of your career, and certain things it can be really harmful in other areas. And I have found that that coming into any room with that energy is more and more harmful in today's world than I ever imagined. And so a lot of the unlearning I've had to do is to try to unlearn all the different characteristics of what we used to think of as a strong leader, and actually amplify a lot of the qualities that were, quite frankly, just underdeveloped, including just the ability to listen and to say, I don't know, and to say, well, that sounds good. If that's where you think we should go, let's go that way, because I'll follow your lead, And so becoming a better follower is one of the most important jobs of a leader right now.
Yeah. I think, was it the Gus Speth quote, the environmental lord, his quote? We're both paraphrasing quite badly. He basically said, I used to think of 10 years of good science, we'd be able to solve most of the environmental problems in the world. But I've actually realized it's not a crisis of science. It's a crisis of consciousness and humanity. And actually what we need is, spiritual and cultural growth as a species. And I think, that's big. That's the thing that, I'm kind of more interested in, sort of the esoteric, the metaphysical, the spiritual side of the business, and how do we get more business leaders to think at a higher level of consciousness, which gets them out of that ego mindset. As that, a great phrase, your ego is not your amigo, but you think it is, because it's directing you, but actually who's in charge, you or the little voice in your head? And I think it's just interesting talking to people and seeing what they've done around that. Sure. Well, we're getting close to time, and I've got a couple of questions I need to get in from my community. This is an anonymous question for you, and this is I think it's quite an interesting question. So, essentially, B Lab has got a monopoly on the certification of the B Corp framework because you guys created it. Obviously, over the last couple of years, due to the monumental growth in the movement, there's been some challenges with certification times. I know you're a little bit out, obviously, you're way out of the organization, but do you think, is there an argument that there should be other companies that you could go to get audited? Because this one person, they're almost a B Corp. They have had a little bit of a long run, and they sort of said, "Look, we've been waiting 6 months for some work. If there had been an alternative to B Lab to get the assessment done, would competition in the market have meant that maybe it would have done quicker? But I guess on the flip side, you've got to maintain standards. So, thoughts on that?"
Yeah, so B Lab is using third-party assessment partners to help speed the queue, for certification. I don't know currently what percentage of those that are certified are coming through that pathway, but that's already happening, and it needs to, and we need more of it. There need to be other folks, other third-party providers, but they have to be, B Lab has to develop the capacity to train and maintain quality, as you said, of those third-party assessment partners. Or else we end up losing the credibility of the certification. If we lose the credibility of the certification, the whole thing's a useless exercise in greenwashing. And so whenever we've had the choice between moving fast and jeopardizing credibility, we've always chosen to move slower and prioritize the credibility of the standards and therefore the movement. And that's frustrating for everybody. And so I totally empathize with folks waiting in the queue for 6 months or longer, to get certified. That's super frustrating. And we're trying, I know B Lab Global is trying to address that as best they can, as fast as they can, and never fast enough.
Yep. I think in many ways it's just reflection of the fact that B Corp's now a thing, and it's tough. We try and help companies navigate it. Last year definitely seemed to be the peak queue for this region, and it's rapidly coming down. And
great.
I guess I sort of flippantly say to people, "Well, you should have been here 6 years ago. You would have got through in like 2 months." So it's partly your fault.
Right. If you were a little bit faster, if you were quicker on the draw, you would have been earlier in the queue.
Yeah. So
and to put it in perspective for folks who don't know, there are as many companies in the queue to become B Corps as there are B Corps.
Yeah.
And so to give you a sense of the exponential growth all the way through COVID and everything, like we expected that to be a significant drop off, and the opposite's happened. And so it's a high class problem of trying to keep up with demand. But again, the priority is always on the credibility of the certification, because ultimately that's the credibility of the collective voice. That's ultimately the purpose. And so if that voice is no longer credible, then the whole effort has been useless.
Yep. No, totally. It's tough. It's like this is it's a whole new concept. It's a whole new thing. No one's done this before. Yeah, in many ways, we're sort of building the plane as it's now just about to hit Mach 2, and we haven't got a guidance system that's it's like so it's all good. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
It's a fair question. I think we're getting on top of it. Well, I'd say B-Lab definitely getting on top of it now. Q's definitely rapidly coming down. A question from Haley. Do B-Lab do any lobbying on behalf of the B Corp community? So, I know in California there used to be tax relief for bingo. Is that correct? Was it in San Francisco, or was it municipal? There was some benefit.
So there are two different things. So in general, there's no different tax treatment for B Corps anywhere. But in Philadelphia, there was a modest tax break, like a tax abatement that was given to B Corps. But it was fairly modest, and we didn't lobby for it. We got a call one day from the then city councilman, who then became the 2-term mayor, whose term just ended yesterday, as a matter of fact, or I guess today, technically, in the elections, who called us up and said, "Hey, we're going to introduce a bill tomorrow to create a tax break for B Corps. We just wanted to check a couple of facts." We're like, "Wait, hello?" And like an intern had picked up the phone, and they put that person on hold. And said, "Somebody from Councilman Kenny's office saying something about a tax break for B Corps in Philadelphia. Who should they speak to?" And so, no, that wasn't anything we lobbied for. And similarly in California, there's a procurement preference.
That was one
for government contracts.
Yep.
For B Corps. And there's a similar thing with the GSA, the federal government, where B Corps are listed among a set of preferred sort of provider relationships that give people like an additional point or whatever in there, trying to achieve federal contract status. But we're not set up to do advocacy work, right? We're a C3 in the US, so we don't do advocacy. We do educate legislators, and what we have focused on in the US and increasingly with our global policy efforts is really around the stakeholder governance. Is we think that the place for us to intervene in the system is at the systemic level, which is at the governance level. And so the thing that we want to advocate for as a community is that all companies above a certain size should be required to adopt stakeholder governance, which just means that they're required to care about more than just their shareholders. They're required to care about all their different stakeholders. That's a lever that affects the entire system and creates it elevates a level playing field, right? It creates a level playing field, and it elevates it to say, it's not just we're all level in a race to the bottom. Just caring about maximizing profit. We're going to elevate the playing field so that we are caring about our impact on all our stakeholders. And instead of it just being these few companies that elect to do it voluntarily, once you get above a certain size, it should be a requirement. And that feels like a public policy objective that's worthy of the B Corp movement's collective voice. So that's one example that I think is arguably the most important example, because if that were true, then all the other public policies that support living wage or net zero or whatever it might be, all of those policies are going to make much more sense in an economy where companies are required to adopt stakeholder governance and care about all their stakeholders. Because then that just becomes a how. Well, how do you do that? Well, how you do that is you would give incentives for a living wage, or you would require a living wage in certain industries, or you would say you need to have a credible plan to net 30 using science-based targets, et cetera, because that would be how you demonstrate that you are successfully considering the impact of your decisions on all stakeholders. And the highest level we could come in to intervene in the system is at the level of governance, because it feels it also feels like the least regulatory, right? It doesn't cost anything. It's not like there's big brother or big sister, like looking over your shoulder, questioning every business decision. Again, we're trusting in the business leaders to exercise their judgment. We're just actually asking them to expand the aperture on the lens about that which they're exercising their judgment. So they're no longer exercising their judgment just upon what's going to make the most money for my shareholders.
Yeah.
That's current law.
Yeah.
What we're saying is like, oh no, you should be exercising your judgment about how you create value for your shareholders, but also how you create value for your workers, your suppliers, your community, and how you're good stewards of the environment. And we think you're smart enough to do that. Like, we believe in you. You and your board can do that. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have confidence in that. We're just going to ask you
It's
to
such a
be.
great phrase, walk and chew gum. Yeah. And that's the thing,
Yeah,
businesses follow the smart people who, theoretically can do anything, like you say, resource capital, human capital, like just
yeah,
change your focus 1 degree over here and see what happens. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Some quick fire ones then, just to finish off before we're completely out of time.
Sure.
What any new or emerging topics that you think will be built into? Obviously, there's a big change. Well, the draft standards are up for discussion still, or about to be implemented. Maybe beyond the next changes. Are you kind of looking for the fringes of like the next topics that might come in, and how, I guess
Yeah.
how well
I
how
think
do you
that
choose them is probably a bigger question than we've got time for.
Yeah, I think that those are great. That's a great question, and that's a great question for the global governance team. Like that's the team that's got to make those decisions.
Yep.
And ultimately, as I've said before, I think the biggest decision is not just what are the standards that help people become a B Corp or improve their individual company performance. I think the big next frontier is what are the areas for collective action for the B Corp community as a whole, and that may be globally or it may be just in New Zealand, or maybe how do the B Corps in Australia have collective voice for something important in Australia? How do they do it in France or whatever it might be? But I think the big question is how do we use the power that we have for more than just doing better for our own business? I think that's the next frontier is around collective action.
Nice. Where do you think B Corp will, in terms of like the movement, where do you think the next biggest growth will come from? Obviously, the UK has just gone bananas.
Skyrocketed.
US is doing pretty good. Aussie, New Zealand's doing pretty good. So maybe outside of those three, who do you think is going to be the next region to really get into it?
Yeah, I mean, there's great things happening in South America. I'm forever optimistic about what is happening on the continent of Africa. It's hard and slow going, but that's going to be the most populous continent in the world, and we're going to need to be. We want to be a leapfrog technology for business in Africa, where they don't have to go and then re-engineer bad practices, which we've developed bad habits in every other part of the world.
Yeah.
As we're building a small business and a mid-sized business community in Africa, and we're not just talking about like massive companies and micro enterprise. We're developing that middle that is the driver of middle class and innovation. The B Corp should be a leapfrog technology for that business community, and so I would hope that there's real growth there. And we haven't touched the surface in Asia,
Yeah.
and obviously India and China in particular, but all throughout Asia, there's lots and lots of growth opportunity, and it's really complicated to do business in those marketplaces with tons of, particularly in East Asia. With the massive importance of family business and more aggressive state and private sector interaction, that's much more challenging. And so that's why it's been like a slower growth area. But over the next 15 years, I would expect that those are areas that we'd see certainly higher growth rates and also see a lot of innovation that might be really useful for all of us to follow from the rest of the world.
Totally. Because you look at you look at some of the scale of opportunity just in like India and then maybe Japan, and you kind of go, well, if those two markets, if they capture or if they get captured by the ideals of B Corp, like kind of like something like the UK has, that is significant impact. Pretty quickly. So watch this space
for sure.
Last couple of questions. Where do you see the B Corp movement in? I suppose we've kind of almost answered that one, like in 2030 beyond. I think we've probably done that one. So, okay, some final question then. Do you think, have we reached the tipping point? Do you think we've reached the global tipping point? Like I said, we're 0.01% of businesses. In my mind, it doesn't sound. Every now and then, I get excited. We're at 7,000. Look, I remember meeting Steve Arder, and I think there was less than 1,000 B Corps when we first met. I'm like, okay, I want in. Like this is like this secret club of like awesome companies. now we've got some really big names joining the movement. We didn't really have a chance to talk about the Nespressos, but I guess I think we kind of did. We talked about have them in the tent. Let's put the accountability on them. Yeah. So do you think we're at the tipping point, or is it still to come?
No, I think it's still to come. I think, as I said, I think we're early stage, and I think we're approaching critical mass, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think that's also a big part of why the collective voice matters, because I think that 8,000 B Corps all doing 8,000 different things and all talking to their little corners has one set of ripples that it puts out into the world. But groups of hundreds or thousands of B Corps that are speaking with one voice about here's the future of business, that carries a lot more cultural weight. And I also think we're in a separate from anything we've talked about today, Tim. I think we're in a very delicate time globally right now with not just climate inequality, but with war and rising sort of authoritarian governments and democracy, things that I've taken for granted for 55 of my 56 years on Earth that I no longer take for granted. And many folks who study this would say where the center right moves in times like this will dictate where society heads, whether it's into totalitarianism or whether it comes into a more progressive movement. And I don't mean progressive politically. I just mean progressive in terms of like more freedom, right? And more opportunity for more people. And when you think of center right energy, that's another way to talk about the business community by and large. Doesn't mean there aren't center left or lefty business people. It just means that generally speaking, in general, business is a center right energy. It's conservative, stability seeking, institutional energy. And so if that's true, if those historians about social change and at these moments in history, if they're correct, that history will pivot on which direction the center right moves at a time of really stark choices, then the business community, those in the business community that can speak to each other in their own language and are given real credibility from each other, if there are business leaders who are willing to use their voice to say to other business leaders, this is a more promising path for us. Let's not throw in our lot with a more totalitarian energy that's going to be restrictive. If we don't think that our best interests are in that direction, if our best interests are aligned with more movements around equity and inclusion and actual equal opportunity for folks around the world, if we believe that that's the path to long-term innovation and higher performance and better quality of life and a better future for our kids, it's that business voice that may end up tipping the scales. And that's why I think that B Corps finding their voice in matters of public issue, not just private sector issue, but sort of public interest, and speak about the common good. I think that's where the future power is needed, and it's needed right now because we're in a decade of that will be quite decisive in terms of which direction we go in around big issues of not only inequality and climate, but also even just liberal democracy. And so for me, that's the biggest area of need and leadership right now, and where I think a business community like the B Corp community is desperately needed.
Nice. Which is it's super pertinent because we've literally just elected a centre-right government here into New Zealand. So maybe we will be the test case for this. Certainly don't see any slowing down of interest in B Corp, despite changing. And sometimes, everything goes on hold while the government's coming in. Well, Jay, thank you so much. We are at time. Well, we're just slightly over time. Just huge appreciation. I mean, you literally, what you and the guys did, changed the course of my life. I was firmly on a different path. Between you and Steve Arder, you are firmly responsible for my life as it is today. So huge gratitude for the, I don't know, just the foresight that you guys had to I think you have already, you have created that collective action already by creating the B Corp movement to help people, because I think there was this emerging group and still emerging group of people who have this sense of dis-ease that business can and should do more, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how do I articulate it? How do I have legitimacy to go and do that? And I think that's what the B Corp movement has kindled and
Tim,
created.
I super appreciate that. And we did nothing but like create the platform and put the megaphone out there. And at the end of the day, it's the B Corp leaders themselves that are the movement. And so it's folks like you, as number 6 in New Zealand, that make it okay for other people to join. Like that's where the real leadership is. And so I'm just in a huge debt to you and to all the folks that are doing stuff all around the world, because you're the ones who are making the community happen, and you're the ones who are attracting other people into it. So just a big thank you to you.
Thanks to everyone. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I will put even more focus on the baton that I'm currently holding and how I pass it on. So yeah, thanks, Jay. Thank you so much. It's been great to finally connect and say good day.
Thanks, Tim.
Hey, it's Tim here, that B Corp bloke from Grow Good. If you want more content on purpose, B Corp, how to do more good in the world as an individual or a business, then you know the drill. Hit the like and subscribe. Check out some of our other videos. They're probably floating around here somewhere. You know how it works. Thank you so much. See you next time.